Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Wisteria here. Let's continue the trial of Jennet Preston. Now, Mistress Preston, you may speak. You have heard the wicked indictments against you. You have heard the account of Mistress Anne Robinson, plus that of Master Thomas Lister, who confirmed everything she said of you. How do you confess your guilt? I do not, Your Honour. My voice broke on the last word. Honour were not a virtue in this courtroom. I did not murder Master Lister. I have murdered no man, woman, nor child. I directed this last at Sir Bromley, who met my eye. I kept my gaze on him as I defended Miss N. I live in the parish of Gisborne, and both I and my husband have been in service to the Lister family at Westby for many years. The old master had a special liking for me. Lies, I tell you. The young Lister were on his feet and shouted down by my kin. Master Lister, Altham cautioned, and he retook his seat. A few months after he died, the master suffered a seizure similar to the one described in this courtroom today, although it were not so severe. I helped him into his bed to rest, but he pulled at me with great strength, muttering such threats as to what he would do to me, what he had allus wanted to do to me. I stopped, embarrassed to have to repeat this. It were not like him, and I cried out. I thought he would force me on my honour. I held Bromley's eye. My husband came and helped me away from him. This were unusual behaviour for Master Lister, as he never before tried to force me, and I can but assume it were an effect of his sickness. He came to me a few days later, when he were well, and he begged my pardon. And I tell he were fair worried about what had happened. It laid heavy on him. He used them words, I swear it. Did anyone else witness these events? Heber asked. Nay, sir, I were alone with him until my husband came, but he can tell you same. A husband does not make a good witness, mistress, not in matters of this import against a wife. Indeed, came from a voice of the gallery. My teeth clenched as I recognised Lister's tone. Altham banged his gavel for silence, and Heber continued. That does not explain the bleeding of the corpse. 'Tis a falsehood, your honour. Master Lister did not bleed after his death. The young master would rather believe in the innocence of his father than in mine. His emotions were high as it were. His wedding day and his mother were also sore distressed, and stayed so until the day she died. 'Tis his grief which has forged his falsehood, and he has brought others on to it. I glared at Master Heber. Your honour, Heber jumped to his feet in protest. You are the man's father-in-law, I shouted. Lister often dines at your table, and yours, sir, and yours. I pointed at Roger Nowell and Nicholas Bannister, sitting alongside the judges. Silence! Altham roared, once more banged his gavel. I will not have this court maligned. I took a deep breath to calm Miss N, then turned to the benches to my right. What happened to Master Lister was a tragedy. Gentlemen of the jury, sure enough, but it were not a murder, and there were no witchcraft, I swear it. Roger Nowell, heretofore silent, spoke up. Yet after your deliverance from this court, not 3 months since, you undertook to join a great assembly of witches at Malkin Tower, in the county of Lancaster. Did ye not? As my examinations prove, you were identified not only by the young James Device, the son and grandson of witches, but also by Catherine Hewitt, and better known as Moldheels, and an acknowledged witch in those parts. Why have we not heard from them? Altham asked. They've been committed in the castle of Lancaster, along on charges of witchcraft, your honour, along with others who have confirmed the proceedings of that wicked assembly. I do, however, have records of my examinations of these witnesses as they pertain to Mistress Jennet Preston, which will prove my allegations, and which I have here. He passed papers to the two judges. These examinations also show that at this gathering, or witches' sabbat, he paused long enough for the words to have their full effect. Jennet Preston here did entreat her fellow witches to aid her in the aim to kill the master lister still living. Once the witches had agreed to assist her, they arranged to meet once more a year hence at the home of Jennet Preston, at which juncture she departed in a flash upon her familiar, a white fowl. The court erupted into noise, part shock and, I were pleased to note, I recognise more than one voice denying the charges on my behalf. My thanks, Master Noel, Altham said. Once order had been restored, then he paused to read the papers and nodded. You may read out these examinations in full for the benefit of the gentlemen of the jury. I stared at the floor as the statements of examinations of James and Jennet Device, their mother, Elizabeth, Moleheels, were read out. Damn her, I thought, her a friend. The testimony followed the lines of Noel's summary, but they were not the words of any of my ilk. They would never have used such words as dined aforesaid, or confer. Them words had been put into their mouths by gentry. I had hoped the juryman had the sense to see it. Many thanks, Master Noel. It now falls to me to address the jury. Altham cleared his throat, pursed his lips in thought. Gentlemen of the jury, it is your solemn duty to observe the particular circumstance of this disturbing matter. Firstly, that Master Thomas Lister Senior was heard by more than one person to denounce the prisoner of the bar, one Jennet Preston, at the time of his death. But the conclusion is more of consequence than all the rest. That on Jennet Preston being brought to the dead corpse, it bled afresh, and after her deliverance in Lent, it was proved that she rode upon a white fowl, and was present in the great assembly at Malkin Tower, with the witches, to entreat and pray aid for them to kill Master Lister, now living, for that he had prosecuted against her. And against these people you may not expect direct evidence, since all their works are works of darkness, and they are presently themselves committed to gaol at the neighbouring county of Lancaster. Therefore I pray God direct your conscience. Finally, I were allowed to sit. I watched the jury as they chattered, knowing they held my life in their hands. My mind blank. I had no more thought. Happen I would never have words again. The court grew restless as the whispered conversations continued. The matters were normally decided in a matter of minutes. Hope seeped into my soul. Did this mean they would deliver me once more? At length Altham banged his gavel, and the headman of the jury stood to address him. My heart knocked hard in my chest as I prepared to hear my own fate. Master Foreman, have you come to a conclusion? Altham asked. We have not, Your Honour. I see. Are your jury close to coming to a consensus? I fear not, Your Honour. In that case, I discharge you to the Grand Jury House to continue your deliberations. Master Sheriff, please prepare a new jury for the next case. That of the seminary priest, I believe. I stared at the sheriff, ushered the jury away. What were happening? I searched frantically for William. He were making his way toward me, but my gaoler hauled me away from his reach. I were to wait, back in chapel, back in purgatory. I stayed there until it grew dark, praying for deliverance from the nightmare. But when the gaoler at last came for me, he took me not back to the courthouse, but back to the filthy, stinking and still crowded dungeon. I were wrong. This were not purgatory. This was definitely hell. And that's the end of this part, guys. Thank you for tuning in to listen, and I shall see you in the next part when we probably get to find out the conclusion to Jennet's trial and whether they found her guilty or not guilty. Many blessings.